There's a town in Texas where the streets are still perfectly paved. Brick roads, engineered for a city of 10,000 people, running straight and even through open cattle pasture, leading nowhere, carrying nothing but wind. There's a town in Nevada where you cannot legally set foot, not because it's private property, because the ground itself will kill you. And there's a town in Pennsylvania that is, right now, on fire. Has been since 1962. Will be for at least another 2 centuries. The streets are warm to the touch in January. The earth exhales smoke through cracks in the asphalt like something buried beneath it is still alive. These aren't the ghost towns they put on postcards, the sanitized ones with gift shops and bronze plaques. These are the ones left behind for reasons nobody wanted to explain. And in places where the silence is too complete, the ruins too recent, or the cause too human to summarize neatly on a state park sign. 17 towns, killed by fire, water, poison, corporate decisions, and the indifferent arithmetic of a nation that moves on and doesn't look back. Each one was promised something: jobs, stability, a future, and each one was left to figure out what comes after the promise breaks. Here are 17 ghost towns in America you don't know exist. Locals won't talk about them. Thurber, Texas. Thurber wasn't abandoned. It was dismantled. When the Texas and Pacific Coal Company decided railroads were switching to oil in the 1920s, they didn't let Thurber fade. They made a corporate decision and executed it. Houses were sold for scrap or physically relocated. Families were scattered. The infrastructure of 10,000 Torrids, a fully company-owned city where the corporation controlled every structure, every store, every church, was methodically erased. What they couldn't carry is still there. A 120-foot brick smokestack rising from open grass with nothing attached to it. Perfectly laid brick streets running through cattle pasture, built to carry a city's worth of traffic, now carrying nothing. A cemetery filled with Polish, Italian, and Mexican names, the immigrant workforce that fed the machine, and has then scattered when it was sold for parts. Most ghost towns die. Thurber was killed, and the clean efficiency of that killing is what makes it strange. Centralia, Pennsylvania. The fire started in May 1962 as a routine trash burn. It should have been nothing. The landfill sat in an abandoned mine pit. The flames found an exposed seam of anthracite coal. Once that coal ignited, nothing stopped it. Not water, not excavation, not 40 years of government intervention. The fire spread through the labyrinth of old mine tunnels beneath the town, invisible and unstoppable. For years, people lived above it. Then the symptoms arrived: headaches, nausea, the metallic aftertaste of carbon monoxide seeping through basement floors. The ground grew warm in winter. Steam rose from road cracks. In 1981, a 12-year-old nearly fell into a sinkhole that opened beneath him, exhaling superheated gas. The federal government paid most residents to leave. Demolition crews leveled nearly every building. Yes, the zip code was canceled in 2002. What remains is a grid of empty streets, fire hydrants standing at the corners of lots that no longer exist, and smoke still rising from vents in the ground. The fire beneath Centralia will keep burning for at least 250 more years, long after everyone who remembers living there is gone. Picher, Oklahoma. Picher helped America win 2 world wars. The lead and zinc extracted here supplied over half the metal used in bullets and bombs during World War I. People were proud of that. The cost didn't become visible for decades. Every ton of ore left behind toxic waste. Mountains of gray chat piles that loomed over homes and playgrounds. Children climbed them. The dust blew through open windows. Lead and cadmium leached into the soil, the water, the bones of people who had no idea what was happening. By the time the EPA arrived, blood lead levels in Picher's children were among the highest in the country. The ground itself was riddled with mine tunnels, hollow beneath the streets, prone to sudden collapse. In 2006, the government declared Picher uninhabitable. A tornado finished what remained in 2008. By 2013, the town was officially dissolved and demolished. The chat piles are still there. Nobody moved those. They stand over empty lots where a community used to be. Monuments to a patriotism that was never thanked and never compensated. Bodie, California. A little girl wrote in her diary on the way to Bodie, "Goodbye, God, I'm going to Bodie." The entry survived longer than the town. At its peak in the late 1870s, Bodie held 10,000 people and 65 saloons. The cemetery filled faster than the church. When the gold ran out and fires took the business district, the remaining residents surrendered one by one. The high desert climate preserved what they left behind. In 1962, the state designated Bodie a park under a philosophy of arrested decay. Nothing restored, buildings stabilized only enough to prevent collapse. Tables are still set, goods still sit on store shelves. A schoolhouse still has desks and books. There's also a curse. Anyone who takes anything from Bodie will suffer misfortune until it's returned. The park receives packages every year, stolen objects mailed back with letters describing accidents, illnesses, financial disasters. Whether you believe that or not, something about Bodie resists being forgotten. Gilman, Colorado. From the highway below, Gilman looks like a postcard. Buildings perched on a cliff face in the Rockies, a company town clinging to rock at angles that argue with gravity. You cannot go there. That's not a suggestion. For over a century, the Eagle Mine extracted lead, silver, and zinc from the mountain beneath the town. The ore was rich. The company built everything. Workers lived in something spectacular that was quietly destroying them. Heavy metals saturating the soil, the groundwater, the air. When the EPA ordered the mine closed in 1984 and declared the site a Superfund location, the company locked the gate and posted warnings. The structures are still there. Houses on the cliff face, windows dark, the school building still recognizable. All of it forbidden, all of it poisoned. And it sits above the highway like something beautiful that will never let you close enough to understand what you're actually looking at. Glenrio, Texas. Glenrio's entire business model was a line on a map. The town sat precisely on the Texas-New Mexico state border, and that split was everything. Texas side, lower fuel taxes, so that's where the gas station went. New Mexico side, looser liquor laws, so that's where the bars were. Route 66 ran through the middle, and the cars never stopped coming. Motels, diners, the Little Juarez Cafe with its curved Art Deco front. In 1973, Interstate 40 opened. It didn't destroy Glenrio. It just bypassed it by 1 mile. The river of traffic moved south, and Glenrio stopped mattering within years. What's left looks like someone walked away mid-sentence. The Little Juarez Cafe still stands, its block letters fading, the structure rotting beneath the branding. Motel units open to weather. Yes, the gas station canopy sagging under its own weight. These aren't ancient ruins. They're mid-century buildings, the kind your grandparents stopped at, now coming apart in the panhandle wind. The quiet is wrong. This was a place built around noise, engines, voices, radios, the constant transactional hum of people moving through. Now it's just metal creaking and signs swinging on rust. Glenrio is proof that infrastructure doesn't negotiate. When it moves, you're already gone. Bluffton, Texas. Old Bluffton is at the bottom of a lake. In the 1930s, the Lower Colorado River Authority dammed the Colorado River for hydroelectric power. Bluffton was in the path. The government purchased properties, residents relocated, and the lake filled in 1937. The town, its farms, hotel, bank, cemetery, disappeared under hundreds of feet of water. During severe Texas droughts, Lake Lyndon B. Johnson drops to historic lows, and Old Bluffton comes back. Tombstones emerge first from the cracked lake bed mud, then the concrete outlines of buildings. The grid of streets becomes walkable again on what was, until recently, the bottom of a reservoir. Visitors can walk through the ruins in a place that was never supposed to be seen by human eyes again. The town's visibility is a direct measure of crisis. When Bluffton appears, the drought is severe and the region is suffering. The ghosts don't rise for dramatic reasons. They rise because the water is gone. Every time it surfaces, it's a warning dressed as a curiosity. Lynch, Kentucky. Lynch was built to be the largest coal camp in the world. For a time it was. U.S. Steel broke ground in 1917 and built not a camp, but a city. 12,000 people at peak, with a hospital, hotel, YMCA, auditorium, and churches for every denomination in the workforce. The company owned the streets, the houses, the store, the water. If you lived in Lynch, you lived inside a corporation's logic, and for decades that logic held. The coal was real, the wages were steady, and people stayed because Lynch had everything, as long as you didn't look too hard at the conditions underground. Then U.S. Steel consolidated, automated, and withdrew. The population collapsed from 12,000 to under 700. What makes Lynch disorienting isn't the decline, it's the scale of what remains. The brick bathhouse still stands. Yet the company hotel, the stone hospital, the infrastructure of 12,000 lives, built to last, still lasting, surrounding a fraction of the population it was designed for. The architecture outlasted the purpose. The buildings are too solid to disappear, which makes the emptiness more complete. St. Thomas, Nevada. St. Thomas wasn't abandoned, it was drowned on a schedule. Mormon settlers built the town in 1865 and farmed brutal desert terrain for over 70 years. Then Hoover Dam changed the math. Engineers calculated what the new reservoir would flood. St. Thomas was in the path. The government purchased properties. Residents packed what they could. The last resident, a man named Hugh Lord, reportedly paddled away from his front door in 1938 as Lake Mead's rising water reached his threshold. The town stayed submerged for decades, but Lake Mead has been dropping to historic lows, and St. Thomas has been coming back. The foundations emerge first, then the streets, then a grid bleached white by mineral deposits left by the receding water. You can walk through it. The bones of a community drowned in the service of someone else's electricity. It's not haunted, it's a barometer. When you can see it, something is very wrong. Kennecott, Alaska. To reach Kennecott, the Guggenheim family built a 196-mile railroad through glaciers and mountain wilderness. The copper was that rich. They constructed a mill, worker housing, a hospital, a school, everything required to keep hundreds of men alive in one of the most unforgiving environments on Earth. For nearly 30 years, it worked. On November 10, 1938, the highest-grade ore ran out. The cost of extraction exceeded its value. The company shut down in a single day. The last train departed with the workers and whatever they could carry. Everything else, the 14-story mill, the machinery, the homes, was left behind because moving it cost more than it was worth. The buildings still stand, stark red against white glaciers. The mill is a skeletal monument, windows empty, floors collapsing. Machinery rusting in the Alaska air. The wilderness has been reclaiming it for nearly 90 years. Ice advances, wood rots, the mountain doesn't need to hurry. Kennecott is now a National Historic Landmark, accessible by a long gravel road. Walking through it, you can feel the weight of the calculus that built it. Every nail driven was a financial decision, every board cut was a line in a ledger, and when the ledger stopped working, the people left, and the landscape began its slow, patient answer. Times Beach, Missouri. Times Beach was a working-class suburb, 2,000 people, ordinary streets, ordinary lives. In the early 1970s, the town hired a contractor to spray waste oil on unpaved roads to control dust. Routine, cheap, practical, the kind of municipal decision nobody would remember. The oil had been mixed with dioxin, one of the most toxic synthetic compounds ever created. Animals started dying. Children developed rashes and respiratory problems. In 1982, the CDC found dioxin levels in the soil over 100 times above the threshold for safe human exposure. All 2,000 residents were gone by 1985. A massive incinerator burned the contaminated soil. The cleanup took years. The land was converted into Route 66 State Park, green, peaceful walking trails and picnic areas. Yet the only original structure still standing is a former roadhouse, now the visitor center. Everything else was incinerated and buried. Most visitors have no idea what's underneath them. Times Beach didn't look like a disaster, it looked like Tuesday. Tuesday turned out to be poison. Indianola, Texas. Indianola is at the bottom of a bay, and you are standing on top of it. In the mid-1800s, this was a major Gulf port, the primary entry point for German immigrants into Texas, a critical supply depot for the frontier. Ships unloaded goods, people, and ambition onto its docks. In 1875, the Gulf hit it with a hurricane that killed hundreds and destroyed most of the town. The residents rebuilt. They believed in the place enough to try again. In 1886, a second hurricane struck with a storm surge so severe the town burned while it flooded. The post office closed within a year. By 1887, Indianola was gone. Not declining, not fading, gone. The site is mostly underwater now, buried under bay sediment. During low tide, if you know where to look, you can make out dark shapes in the shallows. Foundations, wall fragments, a remnants of a cemetery. The streets where children played are right there, beneath the water. You cannot visit Indianola. You can only stand above it. That specific horror, knowing the ruins are present but invisible, is something no historical sign can fully explain. Garnet, Montana. Garnet doesn't have Bodie's violent reputation or Picher's toxic legacy. It was a family town. Schools, social halls, children playing in mountain snow. The kind of place people built because they intended to stay, not because they were passing through. Gold was discovered in the 1860s, and by the 1890s, Garnet held about 1,000 residents. Families who had committed to a life in the mountains and built accordingly. The gold ran out after 1900. A fire destroyed the business district in 1912. Most families left without rebuilding. Montana's brutal winters preserved what remained. 30 buildings still stand. The access road is only open in summer. Winter buries it under several feet of snow, reachable only by snowmobile. The Bureau of Land Management maintains it now. Not as a tourist attraction exactly, but as something that needs to be kept from disappearing entirely. What's unsettling about Garnet isn't scale or violence. It's the domestic evidence. Children's toys, kitchen tables, objects from ordinary lives interrupted and never resumed. This isn't the ghost of frontier chaos. It's the ghost of frontier families who built something real, then walked away when the earth had nothing left to give. Pioche, Nevada. Pioche recorded 72 murders before a single natural death. That isn't legend. That's the documented history of a town where mine owners hired professional gunmen to settle claim disputes before courts arrived. The silver was rich enough that legal processes felt too slow. Disputes ended here in a cemetery. Boot Hill filled fast. The phrase "died with his boots on" appears on marker after marker, a phrase that sounds romantic until you're standing in front of the actual graves. The real monument to Pioche is the courthouse. Budgeted at $26,000 when built in 1872, it ultimately cost nearly $1 million through graft so brazen the county didn't finish paying the debt until 1937, decades after the building itself was condemned as structurally unsound. Pioche survived. About 1,000 people live there today. But walking those streets knowing what they cost, in blood and in money extorted from a county that couldn't afford it, changes the light. Violence here wasn't an unfortunate side effect. It was the operating system. Rhyolite, Nevada. Rhyolite was built in 24 months, empty in 10 years. When prospectors found gold in 1904, industrialist Charles M. Schwab bet millions on it becoming the next San Francisco. By 1907, 10,000 people lived in the desert, a 3-story bank with marble columns, a stock exchange, an opera house, a train depot engineered for permanence. The ore quality had been overestimated. The 1906 San Francisco earthquake rattled investor confidence. The panic of 1907 killed financing entirely. By 1916, Rhyolite was empty. The bank walls still stand 3 stories tall in the desert. The Tom Kelly Bottle House, built from thousands of glass bottles embedded in adobe, survives as the perfect metaphor. Grandiose, hollow, made from trash, still standing after the party ended a century ago. You can almost hear it. The big hammers. How the train whistles. The raw collective belief that this time it would last. Thurmond, West Virginia. Thurmond never had more than 500 residents. Size wasn't its significance. In the early 1900s, this narrow strip along the New River was the operational heart of West Virginia's coal empire. Trains ran constantly. The depot never closed. The banks here handled more money than cities 10 times its size. Then the cuts came. The Depression gutted demand. Diesel locomotives made the steam repair facilities obsolete. Coal shifted and consolidated. Nobody fled in panic. It was a quiet surrender over 50 years, decision by decision, each one survivable on its own, each one making the next more inevitable. As of the last census, 5 people officially reside in Thurmond. The depot still stands, operated by the National Park Service as part of New River Gorge National Park. The commercial buildings that foreclosed on after businesses failed sit intact but hollow. 5 residents, a functioning town in legal terms, an empty stage in every other sense. The architecture remembers what the silence has forgotten. Barthel, Kentucky. Most places on this list can't be visited on purpose. Barthel is different. You can book a night there. The Stearns Coal and Lumber Company built this Kentucky camp in 1902. Company houses, a store, a bathhouse, the superintendent's cabin on the hill, workers' cottages in prescribed order below it. Every structure expressed a hierarchy. The company owned everything. Workers were economically bound through scrip and controlled through every institution the company provided. When coal operations wound down, the camp was abandoned. A private owner eventually stabilized the original structures and turned Barthel into a tourist destination. Today you can stay overnight in the restored miners' cabins. The dissonance is specific. You're choosing to be in a place where choice was the one thing workers didn't have. So you're paying to inhabit the architecture of dependency. The camp built to control a workforce now sells the controlled experience of that history back to visitors at a nightly rate. Barthel is preserved, accessible, and genuinely unsettling. Not because it's haunted, but because it isn't. Because the thing that made it terrible has been laundered into a novelty. And somehow that's the creepiest transformation on this entire list. You sleep in a miner's cabin with Wi-Fi now. The hierarchy is gone. The dependency is gone. But the bones of both are still right there around you. And that comfort is its own kind of dissonance. The company coal camp never fully dies. It just changes what it's charging you for. These towns didn't fail because the people in them weren't trying. They failed because the premise they were built on was fragile, and the forces that built them were never going to protect them when that premise broke. Corporate decisions made in boardrooms, government calculations about where to route an interstate, which ground was too poisoned to remediate. An underground fire nobody could stop. Water rising on a government schedule. A mine playing out. A road drawn 1 mile to the south. That's what killed them. Not bad luck. Decisions. The infrastructure didn't get the memo. Thurber's brick streets are still laid. Lynch's bathhouse is still standing. Garnet's cabins are holding against Montana winters. Bluffton's foundations are still in the lake bed, waiting for the next drought to bring them back. Centralia's streets are still mapped. Fire hydrants still standing at the corners of lots that no longer have houses on them. These structures were built by people who believed in permanence, and the permanence outlasted the belief, which is its own kind of horror. Walk through any of these places and pay attention to what you feel, not the romance of ruins, but the specific sensation of standing in infrastructure built for a future that got canceled, in a place that was promised something and left to figure out what comes after the promise breaks. The schools built for children who never grew up there, the courthouses that once represented order, now representing only its absence, the roads engineered for traffic that stopped coming. That feeling isn't nostalgia. It's a question the landscape is still asking. The map of abandoned America is larger than most people know, and it's still growing.